Hey, welcome to the first of our quick trots around what's happening in the world. Donald Trump's Muslim ban continues to provoke shock and outrage around the globe. In London, Theresa May is being urged to cancel President Trump's upcoming state visit. In Dublin, the Irish government is being urged to cancel the Taoiseach's meeting with President Trump on St. Patrick's Day. This is all over restrictions on 7 Muslim-majority countries, the access of their citizens to the United States. 87% of the world's Muslim population is not affected by Trump's so-called Muslim ban. The largest Muslim countries on the planet, like Indonesia, can still come and go in the United States to their heart's content. The hysteria is revealing not just the fact that 87% of the Muslim world is unaffected by the ban, but what I always think of as the most astonishing statistic of the post-9/11 era, which is that since 9/11, the rate of Muslim immigration to the United States and to the Western world in general has doubled. That's to say, the West's reaction to 9/11 was that it was necessary to demonstrate our niceness by taking in even more immigrants from the Western world. For example, the United States takes in just shy of 300,000 Muslim immigrants annually. For the purposes of comparison, that means that every 2 years, just in Muslim immigrants, it takes in the equivalent of the population of Vermont. Every 2 years. And for those Bernie Sanders fans in Vermont who want to abolish the Electoral College and just determine the president by popular vote, basically, you and your fellow Vermonters will be entirely irrelevant in that arithmetic. This so-called problem over the last weekend, when green card holders and legal immigrants to the United States were detained, 385,000 people entered the United States in the course of the weekend. 109 were held for further questioning. That's 109 out of 385,000. Again, just for purposes of comparison, if you've watched our shows, you know that we have a 5-piece band on the stage. The 5-piece band come from the province of Quebec, just a little ways north of us, and we've paid for big, expensive H-2B visas. I've got the cancel checks made payable to the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Homeland bozos still held my entire band at the border post at Alburgh, Vermont, for 2.5 hours. So in other words, that's a 5-piece band out of the 5 members of my band. 109 people were detained out of 385,000 visitors to the United States. So my band alone is equivalent to, what is that, 10, that's equivalent to 5% of the total detentions over Trump's Muslim ban. My band is equivalent to 5% of that. So that's nothing to do with the Muslim ban. That's actually an impressive rate, given how incompetent and malicious the Homeland Security bureaucracy is. I had to call, when they detained my band, I had to call Supervisor Williams at Highgate Springs and yell at him for an hour in order to get my flautist released. So there's nothing unusual about this. Everyone who has had any dealings with US immigration will know that they are a uniquely malevolent combination of incompetence and spite, and that they will screw you over just for the hell of it whenever they can. So 109 out of 385,000 people coming to the United States in that period is actually nothing to get worked up about. No matter that, unlike Quebec flute players, nobody cares about them. They can be held at Alburgh, Vermont for hours on end and nobody cares. But these guys have generated days and days of protests at American airports. Completely ridiculous. Trump's reaction has been impressive. The acting Attorney General of the United States ordered the entire Justice Department, that's 90,000 employees, not to defend Trump's executive order on Muslim immigration. This emerged yesterday, so he fired her. That's good. He did his Reagan air traffic control moment all in one go. I said in a book of mine a few years ago, After America, if you look at banana republics, they have a president for life. You don't need a president for life if you have a bureaucracy for life. And that has been the situation in the United States and the rest of the Western world, basically since the end of the Second World War. If you've got a left-wing bureaucracy that carries on regardless of whether there's a left-wing government or right-wing government in office, it doesn't really matter who you elect. And that was the message that this acting Attorney General gave. She doesn't care about the result of the election. She doesn't care about representative citizen government. She's going to just order the 90,000 people in her corner of the bureaucracy to ignore the chief executive of the United States and the people who elected him to office. That is disgraceful, and they got rid of her. Meanwhile, up in Canada, Justin Trudeau, the 12-year-old Prime Minister, over the weekend tweeted out in response to Trump's so-called Muslim ban, quote, "To those fleeing persecution, terror, and war, Canadians will welcome you regardless of your faith. Diversity is our strength. Welcome to Canada," unquote. Anthony Fury, who writes for the Sun newspapers up in Canada, tweeted in response, "I expect passive-aggressive virtue signaling from social justice warrior bloggers, but not from the leader of a G8 nation." And I'll make one other response to that. Diversity is not our strength. Diversity is morally neutral. You could have, say, 7 impeccably liberal, progressive, NPR-listening women, and it's not a very diverse group. So you could make it more diverse by having 7 impeccably liberal, progressive, NPR-listening women, plus Sudan's leading clitoridectomy practitioner. And it would be diverse. It would be more diverse, but it wouldn't be the better for it. Diversity is a morally neutral term. But Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoonist, made a brilliant point in relation to Justin Trudeau's virtue signaling tweet. He said, well, now we can have an experiment. We can do it the Trump way, and we can do it the Justin Trudeau way, and we can meet up in 5 years' time and decide which way works out best. Well, it didn't actually take that long for the chickens to come home to tweet. One day later, in response to Justin Trudeau's tweet, 6 people were killed, 6 men were killed at a mosque in Quebec City. And in the 24 hours afterwards, we've had these dueling narratives going on up there in relation to it. The Daily Beast fell for a fake news hoax attributing the mass murder to 2 so-called white supremacists. Then a few hours later, somebody tweeted out that it was 2 Muslims with obviously fake names, and again, other people fell for that. These dueling narratives. I'm not really interested in the narratives because the point of this diversity is our strength stuff. It doesn't matter whether it's white supremacists killing Muslims or Muslims killing infidels or whatever it is. The point is this fractiousness, the dead on either side are the issue. In other words, if you're creating conditions in your country that lead to more murder and mayhem, an elementary degree of prudence is advisable. Quebec City is a very low murder rate. They had just 2 murders in 2015. So when 6 people are killed, that's a big deal. And instead of these banal and dueling narratives, it's worth actually sitting back and thinking about where this kind of stuff is headed. In the end, the guy who was arrested and charged for these murders is a fellow called Alexandre Bissonnette. He's what you would call a pur laine Quebecer, Quebecois through and through. He has multiple likes on his Facebook page. He likes Donald J. Trump, and he likes Marine Le Pen in France, but he also likes the Parti Québécois, the Socialist Secessionist Party in Quebec, and he likes the New Democrat Party, the big socialist party up in Canada. Those two didn't get mentioned. Suddenly he became a Trump supporter. He became a Trump-supporting alt-right white supremacist. It's a tribute to the insanity of our times that a fellow who likes a Quebecois francophone who likes socialists, secessionists, and happens to include among those likes Donald J. Trump, is what the left is reduced to clutching at as evidence of Trump's iniquity. Apparently, he doesn't provoke people to kill Muslims in the United States or even in English Canada, but he's got French Canada fired up to the point where now people are going bananas and killing Muslims because they're hot Trump supporters. Actually, in fact, Quebecois francophones are probably the most conventionally nationalist persons on the North American continent. On the night of the 1995 secessionist referendum in Quebec that was lost by a very narrow vote, Jacques Parizeau, the Premier of Quebec, blamed it on money and the ethnic vote. He was actually right on that, in that immigrants to Quebec vote more in favor of Canada and federalism than they do for secession. Lucien Bouchard, who succeeded Jacques Parizeau as Premier of Quebec, complained that Quebec women had one of the lowest fertility rates of white women anywhere on the planet. That's also actually technically true. If white Catholic Francophone women had children at the same rate they do 50 years ago, Quebec would be an independent republic by now. But they gave up having babies, and now they will never have the numbers to become an independent republic. So those two things happen to be both factually accurate. But forget about that. There is no other politician anywhere in Canada or the United States who would say those things, who would stand up. No viable electorally viable politician in the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, the Canadian Liberal Party, the Canadian Conservative Party, who would ever stand up and blame a lost referendum on, quote, the ethnic vote, i.e. immigrants, or blame it on white women not having enough babies. That's Quebecois francophone nationalism. And the idea that Alexandre Bissonnette had to develop his murderous rages from following Donald Trump on Fox News is completely preposterous, even for media hysteria. But there is a tragic element to what happened in Quebec City yesterday, beyond the evil act that Alexandre Bissonnette committed. He killed 6 people. He killed 6 innocent people who did not deserve to die. And for that, he should be punished, and he should never be heard from again. But what is disquieting is that the effect of this act is going to be to further repress honest conversation about Islam in Canada and the broader West. I watched Canadian television last night. I watched the main CBC broadcast, which is all devoted to weepy candlelight vigils, punctuated by people like the Premier of Quebec saying we have to be careful about what we say because hate speech can inspire the likes of Monsieur Bissonnette to go to a mosque and kill people. We are already careful about what we say about Islam. We are already tiptoeing around on eggshells. We have been told ever since 9/11 about a backlash against Muslims that never comes, to the point where the first thing that happens after a Muslim act of terror is that a spokesman for a Muslim lobby group stands up on TV and warns against the backlash. And the backlash for these 16 years has never come. It became a joke. There was my friend Tim Blair down in Australia after the London tube bombings. A friend of his did a note-perfect parody of a Guardian headline. British Muslims fear repercussions over tomorrow's train bombing. And the backlash never came. Not in America, not in Germany, not in Britain, not in Spain, not in France. It came of all unlikely places in Quebec City. And because of that, and this is what the press coverage is telling us, because of that, the 6 dead in Quebec City count for more than, say, the 6 dead in Melbourne just a few days ago. 6 people died as a result of a guy going bananas with his car and mowing people down. He claimed to be a self-described Islamic Kurd, although he appears ethnically to be Greek or Turkish or Tongan or whatever. And people say, pay no attention to that. He's not Islamic, he's just mentally ill. In other words, his act of mass murder has no broader significance, no matter what he says. He may claim to be doing it for Allah. Pay no attention to him. Pay no attention to him. The 6 dead in Melbourne, the 12 dead from the truck driver mowing down a Christmas market in Berlin, the 32 dead in the airport bombings in Brussels, the 49 dead in a gay nightclub in Orlando, the 86 dead with the truck bombing on Bastille Day in Nice. They are irrelevant. They symbolize nothing beyond the individual acts of mentally ill persons. They have no broader general application. Whereas one man killing 6 people in Quebec City, there are broad lessons we all have to draw from that about encouraging hate, climate of fear, climate of distrust. Roger L. Simon said a couple of days ago, he asked this question: why is it that since 9/11 there have been 30,209 terror attacks in the name of Allah? There have been 38 in the last 6 days alone, resulting in 425 killed and 419 injured. There were also 9 suicide bombings during that time frame. That's true. That's the fact. But all those acts have no broader general significance. Certainly not enough to justify cracking down on immigration from just 7 Muslim-majority countries. But all jihad is local in that sense. It's some guy going crazy here, some guy going crazy there, some guy going crazy over there. But don't you ever dare to think there might be any kind of a pattern to that or anything in common between Melbourne, between Berlin and Orlando and Brussels and any of these other towns. But this one act in Quebec City, an opportunist political class is already using it to further restrict the parameters in which we can address this issue. And that is why it is very important that Donald Trump hangs on to this first tentative step to address the realities of the situation, which is a very modest step. Simply to say that there are 7 countries in the world, of the dozens of Muslim-majority countries, that he thinks require excessive scrutiny in order to prevent incidents like Orlando, Berlin, Brussels, Nice, whatever, in the future. And that has the support on some polls of nearly 70% of the US population. The majority of people don't want to keep holding candlelight vigils for gay guys slaughtered in a nightclub, or Christmas market shoppers, or people celebrating the national holiday on the promenade in Nice. They're sick of having to hold candlelight vigils. And they would like to be able to live in truth and speak about these issues honestly. There is a famous Kipling poem with a famous first line: "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." And we have embarked on a great experiment in which people are now demonstrating in the streets, in effect, for the right of the entire East to move to the West, to dissolve that distinction that Kipling wrote about. As I said, it's a famous first line, but Kipling is a great poet. And he had a sophisticated understanding of the world. And the third and fourth lines of that poem are not so well known. But there is neither east nor west, border nor breed nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. And Kipling thus began his tale of what happens when an Afghan horse thief and an English colonel's son encounter each other and pursue each other and eventually come to an understanding of each other and an admiration for each other's virtues and each other's honor. And Kipling is right that East can meet West and West can meet East in those circumstances. But only if both sides have honor and integrity and live in truth. That's to say, they are honest with each other. They're honest with each other's virtues and honest with each other's failings. And what we see in these protests south of the border and the reaction to this act of murder north of the border is that large swathes of both America and Canada would rather take refuge in delusion. And that way lies madness, and that way lies more violence and more death. And shame on the protesters this side of the border and the opportunists north of the border for what they're doing on that. See you next time.